Go has way too many ways to create variables. It confused me a ton when I was first learning. So I wanted to create a short video that I can reference when I inevitably forget stuff. And hopefully it'll help you out too. So let's get to it. Let's start out with the var keyword. So get the var, put your variable name, then the variable type, and finally you assign a value to the variable. But there's a few variations on this. First, you don't need to put the type. You can just let go do type inference. Second, you don't need to assign a value. You can just declare the variable. But if you do that, you do have to add the type in. Now, when you do this, you might think that x3 would just be an empty variable, but Go will actually instantiate it as the 0 value for whatever type you're using. So this is equivalent to var x4 int equals 0. So both x3 and x4 will be 0 in this case. The same thing applies to all types. So if you have a string, then the default value will just be an empty string. If you had a Boolean, the default value would just be false. So it's important to know what the 0 value is for every type. Then to confuse things a bit, because we got to keep you on your toes, if you use a pointer to a type, instead of getting the 0 value for that type, you'll get nil because the 0 value of a pointer is nil. The same thing applies for slices. You won't get an empty slice with a length of 0. You'll get a nil variable because the 0 value of a slice is nil. But if it's an array, then you get the array populated with the 0 value of whatever the inner type is for the array. So ints in this case. And then structs will give you an instance of the struct with all of the fields set to the 0 value for each field's type. So I can do something like this and get a blank slate weight group. Unless it's a pointer to the struct, now we're back to being nil. Fun stuff. So you can see how this can get confusing. It all kind of makes sense, sort of, once you get used to it, but there are still a bunch more ways to create things. Isn't that awesome? Now, if you think the var syntax is too long, you're in luck. There is a shorthand, but it's only usable inside of functions. So if you're doing a top level variable, it has to be with a var. So in our function, instead of doing something like var z int equals 10, I can just do z colon equals 10. So this way always uses type inference, so you'll always get an int out of it. If you need something like an int 64, then you either need to do type conversion or you need to use var. With the shorthand, you always need to assign a value to the variable. So you never get the automatic 0 value that you would with var, unless you explicitly set it to the 0 value. And I actually like using shorthand more because of that. But overall, I think it would have just been better all around to have one standard way of doing things. Okay, let's confuse you some more. Like I said earlier, if you use var with a slice and don't assign a value to it, the 0 value of it will be assigned, which is nil. But you can make it an empty slice by actually assigning an int slice to it. So the length and capacity here are 0. And you can't control that unless you use the built-in make function. So if I want, let's say, a length of 3 and a capacity of 6, make lets you do that. And because the slice needs something at each index up to the length, it will be populated by, you guessed it, the 0 value for the type. You can also use make to create a map, which lets you give a size hint to the compiler in runtime. But you could always just stick with the basics too. And make is also the only way you can create usable channels. You could use var to create a channel like this, but that will give you a nil channel, which is not usable. Next, there's another built-in function called new, and this will allocate the 0 value of whatever type you pass into the function, and then it will return a pointer to that type. And it doesn't matter what type you pass into new, you always get a pointer out. So here we'll get a non-nil pointer to a slice. Okay, last thing, but it's a bit more straightforward than what we've done so far. The const keyword can be used to create a constant, and this can be used inside of functions or outside, so you can use it at the top level as well. And that concludes my TED Talk. This was a super fun video to do, so if you want more content like it, let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this rant, consider dropping a like and subscribing for more stuff. As always, keep breathing, keep building, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.